Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. I know a lot of you have been waiting for it, and the latest volume of Kowabana, Volume 10, is now out. If you haven't checked it out yet, do head over to Amazon to pick up your copy right now. We've got creepy curses, human horrors, vengeful ghosts, and much more on display, so don't miss out. This week is our 120th episode, and it feels like we just celebrated our 100th episode just a few short weeks ago. As such, I thought it would be nice to look at another long story this week, and this one will certainly get under your skin, so to speak. A young man asked two of his friends to help him with a strange custom back in his home village. They have to seal a demon. There will be no danger to them, or so they're told, but the ritual naturally doesn't go off without a hitch, and all of their lives are changed forever. Find out why in Seal. When I got back to my apartment, I found a letter waiting for me. It was a plain envelope with black letters. No doubt about it. It was from Yasutoshi. This was the 30th letter I'd gotten from him. The last one had been quite some time beforehand, so I was a little worried, but he seemed to be okay. There was power lying in the letters that made up the name and address. I went inside and opened the seal. In complete contrast to the letters on the envelope, the letters inside were messy and all over the place. I looked up from the letter and tried to remember what happened. I wasn't used to driving yet, and so I was starting to feel a little tired. The road wound through the countryside, deep in the mountains. The greenery only seemed beautiful for the first hour or so. Yasutoshi sat in the passenger's seat, and he showed no signs that he wanted to take over driving. Normally, he was the one who drove. I pulled over on the shoulder of the road and stopped the car. Yasutoshi looked at me like, "What's wrong?" "You take over now." "Kosuke, my license has been suspended. I can't break the law," he said, and put his hands together in apology. He was the eldest son of a monk and would take over at his father's temple in the future. And he was, in many ways, a guy you could count on. I snapped at him. "Seriously? You're the one who lost your license for speeding, and that's what you have to say? That? You sure you're a monk?" "Look, I'm reflecting on my actions, okay? I'm not going to make that mistake a second time. And what's with you trying to tempt me like this? You should be ashamed of yourself, you devil," he said with a cool expression on his face and pointed ahead of us. There was an old sign that said, "Asadachi, 4 kilometers ahead." That was our destination. "We've come all this way and you're just gonna throw that out now. How pathetic. Fine. I'll sin again, just for you," he said and sighed. "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll drive," was the only thing I could say. After what felt like an incredibly long 4 kilometers, we arrived at our destination. We were supposed to meet up with another friend from back home here, Tomoaki. We agreed to meet at the remains of the elementary school. I found it right away. Everyone we saw was old, and we were the only people there in our 20s, which made me feel like the area was depopulating rather rapidly. But everyone was bright and cheerful regardless. Tomoaki grinned and then approached us. "Hey guys, what's up?" "Oh? Kosuke drove? Well then, why don't we take a break first before we get going?" "Eh?" I said. "Isn't this the spot?" "Huh?" Tomoaki replied. "Our goal is a mountain an hour's drive from here." "Tomoaki, who's going to drive?" "Well, I'm just a paper driver, so it's dangerous if I knew this trip was a bad idea. Normally, the three of us would split duties and have fun together. But this time around, Yasutoshi was silent and Tomoaki seemed somewhat nervous. And I was the one tired from all the driving. Something wasn't right here. Yeah, our trip this time wasn't for sightseeing or picking up girls. We came here to seal a demon. It all started that spring, when it was still just a little cold. I was at home playing games or watching DVDs or something with Yasutoshi when Tomoaki came over. He looked unusually quiet and meekly asked if we could help him out with something. "What, did you fight with your girlfriend or something?" I said with a grin. "No," he answered immediately, and my expression turned serious again. Surprised, I asked him to explain. "The chief priest of my local temple is in a bad way," he said. Tomoaki's family was one of 4 that supported that particular temple, and when the chief priest of that temple died, there was something called a goyaku that had been in place for generations. This was assigned to the family head of each of the 4 families, but because Tomoaki's father was sick, he was unable to fulfill his duty, and so it passed down to his son instead. However, since he wasn't the official family head, Tomoaki was allowed 3 people to assist him. But the role of goyaku required special steps to be taken, and they were unable to find any locals to help. Normally, outsiders would be forbidden, but in this case, they were willing to make an exception. I said the first thing that came to mind. "You're not gonna tell us that we have to help make that monk into a mummy or something, are you?" Tomoaki smiled. "No way. Dealing with dead people is easy. What we're dealing with, though, is a demon. We have to seal a demon that's coming to eat the chief priest's flesh," he said, looking somewhat embarrassed. Silence filled the air. "You're shitting me." "No, I'm being very serious. You guys don't have to do anything. I think you won't have to do anything other than watch. There are a few rules to follow, but all you have to do is what the other 3 say. You won't be attacked by the demon or anything either. At worst, we might just get a fever for a few days." To be honest, I thought there would be more action involved. Like, these sorts of situations generally called for charms of protection, spells, magical barriers, that sort of thing, right? But apparently, it was nothing like that. The demon would appear in a certain location, and then they would seal it there. That was that. And we, as the attendants, just had to be there. We just had to watch. But apparently there were differences in what people might or might not see. I was curious, so I agreed to go. Yasutoshi could see ghosts, so I was a little worried about him, but in the end, he agreed to go as well. And so, it was decided that the 2 of us would help him, and Tomoaki returned to his hometown before us. We later went to see him off at the station. He reminded us to come as soon as he contacted us, and then he got on the train. "Ah, so what's this demon's name?" I suddenly asked, and he gave me a weird, creepy smile. That was it. Yasutoshi was quiet the whole way back. Now, he wasn't normally a gloomy guy. He was so cheerful that it was hard to believe he came from a family of monks. Man, why didn't he tell us the name of the demon? I was unable to read the room, and so I asked him something that was probably the reason for his silence. He looked me straight in the eye. "You might look stupid, but you can be counted on when the time comes. I think you might be necessary for what's coming up," he said. Do I really look that stupid? I asked. But anyway, Tomoaki said we wouldn't be in danger. I was a little surprised that someone I relied on so much placed so much trust in me. He might lie to women, but he doesn't lie to us. If there's no danger involved, then why couldn't they find any locals to help? We don't ever speak the names of such terrible beings in our industry. The only reason I can think of for why he wouldn't tell us its name is because it's something that could affect our friendship. It's something that comes after dead monks. As someone who's going to be a monk, don't you think I'm not really a good fit for this? Yasutoshi, so then, why did you accept his offer? You make it sound like it's actually going to be really dangerous. Should we turn him down then? Look, Tomoaki only made the decision to go back home once we agreed to go. Seems like he can't escape his hometown's customs. I don't know about you, but I can't turn my back on him. I can't either. I want to help him. And I was about 80% curious. But you might be in danger, right? I don't want to lose my friend over this decision. Yasutoshi? Hearing what he said, my 80% curiosity turned into 80% or maybe even 85% fear. Watching a demon. I had only thought of it as a small test of courage, nothing more. I fell silent. You really are an idiot. You're so easy to make fun of, Yasutoshi said with his usual smile. Don't make fun of me, I said angrily. The conversation then turned to lunch and women, but inside, I was still somewhat afraid. It was a magnificent temple with a main gate. We parked in the area in front of the entrance and then walked over. A man of about 60 came out to greet us. Tomoaki-kun, are these your attendants? Tomoaki told him we were and went to introduce us, but the man held his hand up. We don't need to know each other's names, he said, and then continued. In principle, what happens here stays here. However, if you wish to talk about it, then you may. It's not like anyone will believe you anyway. I still can't see it myself, but everyone can hear the sounds. That's why we know that it's there. Now, the other two are watching the chief priest, so let me explain in simple terms what's going to happen now. You can ask Tomoaki the story and details after. Come this way. At first, I was annoyed with his manner of speaking, but Tomoaki later told me that it was because he was worried about Yasutoshi and I. He took us to an old stone well off to the left behind the temple. The top was covered in a mess of wooden sticks to block access, and on top of that was something that looked like a bamboo basket. Apparently, the demon was sealed in that well, and it was sealed with both chaos and order. However, that seal would be broken on the 7th night, and the demon would break out to eat the chief priest. And, in short, it was our job to make the new seal by putting brand new sticks over the mouth of the well and then placing the basket on top of them. That was it. The sticks were placed sort of like a campfire, with 7 on the first layer, 7 on the second, etc., with 7 layers all up. However, the 6th level alone was to have 8 sticks, and that 8th stick alone had a special curse or something placed on it. The other 49 sticks were just fakes to protect this one. Incidentally, the number of sticks in each level was different each time, but once the seal was placed, they'd be left to get old and rot naturally. The next seal would take place before the next chief priest died, and each time that happened, the seal would be created again. Apparently, the well was sealed only twice before and after the chief priest died. So that was why the sticks were new. There was something bothering me though. When it comes time to seal it, should we not be here? There's no problem when the demon leaves, but it's scary when it goes back. This seal was made 3 days before the chief priest died, and it's called a death lid, so it doesn't have a lot of power. But there's one stick missing. We break it deliberately once the chief priest dies, and the demon gains power so that we can seal it again. What you will be dealing with is the living lid. It's a seal that will ensure it can't escape again, so this part is very important. The youngest of the 4 Goyaku was the one who had to deal with the lid, and so that meant Tomoaki and us. I mostly understood what it was that we had to do. I think we definitely had the most important role of all. Well, Tomoaki did, but we were there to help him. Alright, first we'll head into the main hall to pray for the chief priest. Then we'll eat. I really didn't want to see a dead body before dinner, but he was in a regular coffin, so I thankfully didn't have to see him. The other 2 Goyaku were seated nearby and chanting. It had been 6 days since the chief priest died. Thinking about it made me lose my appetite, and Tomoaki seemed to notice. The body was properly embalmed, so it's much nicer than you're thinking, he whispered to me. We went to relax in the temple's tatami room, and an elderly woman brought us some rice and miso soup, alongside a few simple side dishes. "Sansuke-don, thank you for all of your hard work," she then said. "Sansuke-don? Who's that?" I asked Tomoaki. Yet it was Yasutoshi who answered. "I think she means for helping with the birth. Those are the characters used for that word, right?" "That's right," Tomoaki agreed. "But don't you think it's strange?" "What is?" I asked. "I mean, we're Sansuke-don, the ones sealing the demon." "Ah, but yeah." My brain stopped working for a moment. Yasutoshi grabbed a rice ball, removed the pickled plum from the middle, and then started eating it. "I'd like to ask about the sealing process, but I guess we can't do that until after," he said, his face frowning as though he still tasted the pickled plum in the rice. "Yeah," Tomoaki replied. "You don't need to know the details to help. It's probably for the best if curious guys like him don't know beforehand." He looked at me as he said it. Yeah, alright, I was a curious guy, but inside I was still a little anxious, or maybe even afraid of what was to come. At any rate, we were free until evening the following day, although Tomoaki was apparently quite busy. So Yasutoshi and I walked around the temple grounds to kill some time. As we lit some incense for the chief priest, Yasutoshi stared at the ceiling the whole time. Intrigued, I looked up as well, and there were probably 20 or so charms stuck to the wooden beam above us. "Whoa, what the hell?" I thought, when a voice suddenly spoke behind me. "Those are the names of all the chief priests who have worked here." I turned around, and it was the old guy who had shown us to the well. "That one on the right is the first generation priest. That is the name of the first chief priest involved with this sealing ritual. The characters are difficult to read, right? I do believe that this particular chief priest was the 26th or 27th generation." And having said that, he then disappeared down the hall. I counted the name tags, but I could only count 24. I was unexpectedly relieved, but Yasutoshi kept staring at the name of the first chief priest and didn't move a muscle. Was that someone you know? Yeah. Eh? Seriously? Dude, you seriously keep falling for everything. Are you really that simple? Yasutoshi then laughed, but it wasn't a smile that matched his face. It was getting dark outside and some bedding had already been laid out for us. Tomoaki said he'd be taking turns with the other Goyaku to stay awake. You might hear some noises during the night, but don't worry about them, he said as he left. And as soon as everything grew quiet and I laid down to sleep, I heard it. It sounded like a moan or a groan, kind of like a kitten. I loved cats, so I sat up before I could stop myself. In all honesty, I was just bored and thinking it might be a good way to kill some time. Yasutoshi put his hands on my knees and pushed me back down. He pushed so hard that it hurt. That's not a cat. Don't go outside. His voice was low and hushed. A chill ran through my body and I lay back down. It honestly sounded like the sweet voice of a tiny kitten. If you love cats, then you no doubt know what I'm talking about. As long as I didn't pay any attention to the sound, then I was fine. And next thing I knew, it was morning. I was no doubt exhausted from the drive, so I slept the entire night away. Yasutoshi was already awake, and his face pale. No, it looked like he hadn't even slept a wink. Nothing bothers you, does it? It was the first thing he said, even before good morning. The day passed and then evening arrived. It was then I was greeted by the biggest shock of the day. A body was hanging from the large tree in front of the well. Not just any body, though. It was the body of the chief priest. His eyes were sunken, his chin tight but mouth oddly open, his skin pale, yet his back almost entirely black. Any idea lingering in my head that we were here for fun vanished in an instant. We were here to seal a demon. The chief priest's body was covered in straw that had been woven together like sacred rope that hung to the ground. The ground beneath him was black and dirty, which was probably caused by his body itself, but oddly, the air didn't smell too bad. His body was surrounded by firewood in the shape of a C, with an opening for the demon to enter. Then they would drop the chief priest's body and burn everything together. Then the ashes and part of his remains would be sealed in the well, and that was that. It could have just been a strange cremation ritual that we were about to take part in, and maybe that was why the locals didn't like it. At around 8 p.m, it happened. I thought I heard the sound of that kitten again, and although it was hard to see because of the bamboo basket on top, the sticks that sealed the well started to vibrate, like something was pushing from underneath. There was a crunching sound as well. Before long, 1 and then 2 sticks fell to the ground. By the time over 20 of them had fallen, this time the bamboo basket started to make crunching noises as well. It was like something was trying to crawl out from inside it. We held our breath as we watched, and then, with a large cracking sound, the basket fell to the ground as well. I swallowed nervously. I could still hear that sound like a kitten, and the sound of something seemingly falling to the ground. Then, the sound slowly approached the hanging chief priest. I couldn't see anything, but something was definitely there. It was the demon. It was at this point that I realized it wasn't the sound of just one kitten's voice, but rather dozens of them. Fortunately, I couldn't confirm anything on the ground that was lit up by the bonfires, because I couldn't see anything. At first, I kind of wanted to, but Then I realized I was actually relieved that I couldn't see the demon. At the same time, I realized that Yasutoshi was standing next to me and I looked over at him. The expression on his face was something I've never seen before. I suddenly grabbed his arm and pulled him back. It seemed to bring him back to his senses and he quickly thanked me. "Dude, can you actually see it?" I asked. "Yeah. It's terrible." As we were talking, the large branch the chief priest's body was hanging from started to crack. Yasutoshi looked up before he could stop himself, but then he soon averted his gaze. I looked as well, and although there was no wind, the rope hanging from the branch moved unnaturally, swinging the body beneath it. Before long, the 4 Goyaku, including Tomoaki, plugged up the hole in the C shape with firewood. When they were done, they rang a bell and started chanting. Then they cut the rope and the chief priest's body fell to the ground. It fell with a dull thud. It made me think they might get arrested for messing with a corpse or something. The 4 of them placed firewood and leaves over the body, then lit a fire. It roared to life, and next thing I knew, the sound of the kittens had stopped as well. Their job now was to watch over the body until nothing remained. A body burned right in front of them. Ah, yes, that definitely would be a traumatic experience, for sure. It was almost dawn by the time the cremation was over, and we all slumped like we were drunk from the fire. I think I was exhausted, but at the same time, I couldn't sleep either. They put the remains in a wooden box and then brought it over to us. "Now, this is the final part. We're counting on you," the old man said. Tomoaki nodded, took the ashes, and then sprinkled them in the well. The other 3 continued chanting. Yasutoshi and I joined Tomoaki and helped him seal the well. It was over in about 20 minutes. And the demon was sealed. I looked at Yasutoshi, standing beside the well, and although I was still frightened, I also didn't feel too bad. The sky was starting to brighten around us. Voices came from the main hall, and several women came out with food and a large amount of salt. Apparently it was to purify the entire area, even themselves. We received 2 bags of salt, and I went over to Yasutoshi to hand him one. He was still by the well, with that same expression from earlier on his face. "Hey! Yasutoshi!" I screamed before I could stop myself. He slowly turned to look at me. "The seal is complete, right? Hey, I think it was... Kosuke? There was a little girl." He closed his eyes and grabbed his head. "There was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. But that thing, it had 1 arm coming out its left shoulder and 3 coming out its right side, like spider legs. It jumped out, and then there was a spider head by its left shoulder. That girl was next to the well. She was sealed in there with it too, wasn't she?" "Is she still there now?" I asked. "No, she's not there now. She disappeared when the basket broke." My insides twisted and turned. "Then it's no problem," I said, although I had 0 proof that there was, indeed, no problem. That night, Yasutoshi broke out in a high fever. We stayed at Tomoaki's house for the next 2 days, and then we went home. Tomoaki joined us and said he would drive as his way of saying thanks for our help. I enjoyed the view from the passenger seat, which sure looked different. I grabbed my seatbelt as we entered the city and screamed, "Brake! Brake!" which wasn't something I saw myself saying at the time. Yasutoshi, who had recovered from his fever, drew a picture of the demon he saw for us. Tomoaki knew what the demon looked like, so he was like, "Oh no, so you saw it, huh?" The head was like that of a baby's, about the size of a rice ball, and it had human arms and legs and spider legs randomly attached to it. Numerous things also hung from the bottom of its jaw, and these moved around limply. The creature's eyes were all closed for some reason. The mouth was not where it was supposed to be, and apparently, when the creature fell to the ground, he clearly saw the things hanging from its jaw, and it was these things that were making the sound like kittens. And it was dozens of these things that attached to the chief priest's body. When the cremation began, they all stopped crying at once, and they turned to look at the goyaku, with blood streaming from their eyes. When he heard that, Tomoaki fell silent. Yasutoshi never said anything about the girl next to the well, so I didn't either. At any rate, I thought we had finally returned safe and sound. For me, the most dangerous part of the entire trip was the car ride on the way back, and the sealing was simply a surprise event along the way. I decided we should have an exorcism party once we got back to my place. After all, we had to get Tomoaki to tell us about the sealing and the history behind it and such. Then it would all be over. Yasutoshi and I drank shochu while Tomoaki had a beer as he told us everything. "It's not like I know all the details," he started. "In each of the 4 families, the sealing is passed down orally, and you don't find out until you become the family head." He held the beer in his left hand and grabbed some snacks. I was acting for my father this time around, so the only new information I got was about the sealing. Yasutoshi might be interested in the story behind the method, but I doubt Kosuke is, so let me tell you about the goyaku. It all started around the beginning of the Edo period. There was a large battle, and numerous men from the villages died. Lacking workers, the remaining villagers died of starvation. But regardless, once the war was over, life returned to normal. And it was around this time that the villagers of this particular village came to treat spiders, who captured their prey in webs and never let them go, quite preciously. These spiders were what we now know as golden spiders, although the villagers called them daijo. At some point, it was decided that it should be men who looked after them, and women should not touch them. A village code was established, and it was forbidden to kill these spiders. One day, a wedding was held at the home of the village chief. The second son of the chief priest from a neighbouring village was about to join the family. The young couple got along well, and the wife soon fell pregnant. The wife's parents were so happy that a day didn't pass by where they didn't ask if their grandchild had been born yet. However, the husband from the neighbouring village just couldn't get used to the spiders, no matter what he did. One day, as he was walking by a dry well, he noticed the biggest spider he had ever seen by it. This spider was so large that he feared that if the family discovered it, he would be forced to take care of it. And so, he killed the spider and threw it down the well. Unfortunately for him, his very pregnant wife saw him do it. Killing a spider in a household with a pregnant woman was considered terribly unlucky, not to mention forbidden according to the village's practices, and so the wife blamed her husband. The husband tried to calm her down, but as they struggled, he accidentally knocked her into the well. He immediately ran for help, but it was too late. The fall killed her, and it had torn her stomach open as well. They were unable to save the baby girl, and she was buried at the bottom of the well without so much as a memorial service. A few short nights later, the strange cat's call began. People who listened closely claimed that it sounded like a voice calling out, "Mama! Mama!" And before long, family members would wake up in the morning to find themselves covered in small bites that were slow to heal and hurt tremendously. These bites always coincided with the nights the strange cats cried outside, and rumors circulated that the ghosts of the wife and child had transformed in their hunger. Then finally, the husband himself encountered the strange apparition. However, unlike the other cases that seemed like mere bites, the husband was attacked so badly that it was like something tried to eat him. However, the husband himself felt no pain, and after that night, nobody else was attacked either. But the husband, it seemed, was being eaten, bit by bit, night after night. The elderly village chief and his wife, struggling with the loss of their only daughter, then sent the husband, the only person being affected by the strange apparition, away. However, once the husband was gone, the strange affliction spread throughout the entire village like wildfire. The thing was clearly looking for the husband, and so the village tried to bring him back, but the village chief of the neighboring village didn't wish to see his son devoured by a demon, so he refused their requests. The elderly couple was so troubled that they sent a messenger to a nearby temple to beg for help with the strange occurrences taking place in the village. Those at the temple were troubled upon hearing the news, for they knew of no way to deal with such a matter. However, there was a traveling monk there at the time, and he decided to take the job on. When the monk and his attendant arrived at the village, the majority of the villagers had been struck down by the strange occurrence sweeping through like a plague. Many of them had already died. The attendant was so scared that he tried to flee, but they were somehow able to find guidance to the husband's house, and there they discovered the elderly village chief and his wife had already passed away. The monk erected a spiritual barrier and spent the night looking for the truth behind the strange occurrences. Several days passed, and then the monk suddenly appeared before the husband in the neighboring village. The monk spoke to him with his parents. "Your son has likely killed a terrible spider," he said. "It appears it was an evil spirit from far away who, upon learning that the village revered spiders, then possessed one. What you did was a good thing. However, that spirit then possessed your wife and tried to trap you. You were saved by the kami attached to you, who would not allow such a thing to occur, and they also sent your wife down to hell. Sadly, I fear it was not just your wife, but your child as well. And it would appear that the souls of the dead spider and your child have now mingled. That well connects to the underworld, so it serves as the birthplace of demons, such as children yearning for their parents, or the children of spiders who eat their parents, which is what was birthed this time around. As the parent of this demon, you must revere it. Once you die, you will be eaten, and 4 houses in the 4 cardinal directions must be built to soothe your spirit, until it can rest." After that, the husband prayed by the well under the guidance of the monk, and then he became a monk himself as well. I realized I was still holding my cup in my hands, and finished the shochu in one go. The names we saw on the charms at the temple. A demon that still hasn't been able to move on. Yasutoshi also looked kind of pale. We finished drinking and then went to bed. When I woke up, Yasutoshi was nowhere to be seen. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer his phone either. Several days later, I received a letter from him. He apologized for disappearing without a word. He said that he was confined somewhere and undergoing an exorcism. Apparently, that girl he saw by the well had possessed him. That fusion of human and spider. The thing that had to be sealed most of all. But why did it possess Yasutoshi? Well, The name the husband received when he became a monk was Taishun. The characters making up Yasutoshi's name could also be pronounced the exact same way. They had the same name. He recognized this immediately when he saw the name at the temple. Did the demon mistake him for its parent? He couldn't think of any other reason. He referred to the demon as the newborn spider in our letters, but I still don't know its actual name. We came to the conclusion that the first demons he saw were likely more influenced by the spiders that wanted to eat their parents, while the girl he saw by the well was more like a human who longed for her parents. We didn't know if the girl had always been there or if she appeared because Yasutoshi was there. The 4 Goyaku, including Tomoaki, appeared to be unaware of her presence. That temple now has a new chief priest. And what do you know? It's Tomoaki. He never once imitated that he wanted to be a monk. It's almost like he was sacrificed. That might actually be it. He was crying. I should go and see him again soon. Quite a bit of time has passed since then. Yasutoshi still hasn't come out. When I got back to my apartment, I found a letter waiting for me. It was a plain envelope with black letters. No doubt about it, it was from Yasutoshi. The last one had been quite some time beforehand, so I was a little worried, but he seemed to be okay. There was power lying in the letters that made up the name and address. I went inside and opened the seal. In complete contrast to the letters on the envelope, the letters inside were messy and all over the place. I looked up from the letter, and as I tried to remember what happened, the images slowly came to view inside my head. The letter had an address, and it said just one thing: I'm waiting. There was something wrong, and Yasutoshi was seeking my help. I threw a few essentials into a bag and made my way towards the station. As I got off the train, I locked eyes with a monk on the other side of the ticket gate. He was young with scary eyes. What on earth had those eyes seen to look like that? I couldn't help but wonder. He walked over to me as I stood there in silence and said, "This way." He grabbed my bag and started walking. The drive took us about an hour, and the location was a place that may or may not really fit a monk. I'll just leave it at that. If I had been alone, then I clearly would have had trouble figuring out if this was the same as the address in the letter. We went in through the back and walked down a hall with a small garden to the left. A girl in Japanese-style clothing who looked to be maybe 15 or 16 sat on a rock in the garden a short distance away, with her back to us. It felt a little strange. Right around the halfway mark of the garden, the hall turned right. The air around us changed, and as we walked down the hall, a strange sensation like being ensnared by a fox washed over me. Suddenly, the monk in front of me stopped walking. "How do you feel?" he asked. When I told him, he said, "It seems you were possessed by something, but it's gone now. When we turn that corner, we pass through a barrier that nothing evil may pass. Well then, this way please." He then guided me into a room. There were 2 other people inside, and I couldn't stop myself from yelling when I saw one of them. "Yasutoshi!" I think he smiled. His lips quivered. He was nothing but skin and bones, wearing a monk's robe, and he sat quietly. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I sat down next to him before I could stop myself and grabbed his hand. Unexpectedly, he squeezed it tightly. At that moment, flames of hope roared to life within me. He's going to be just fine, I thought. When I looked up, I heard a faint, hoarse voice. "You look well. Don't cry, idiot." So this was why he wrote letters and didn't call. "Stop that," he said again once I started crying again. "My grandfather will talk to you," he said, and I nodded. Yasutoshi was counting on me. I made up my mind. Yasutoshi followed the young monk and left the room. The other monk in the room was no doubt his grandfather, and they left us alone. He spoke in a thick yet gentle voice. "Kosuke-kun, I'm sorry to trouble you today. I am Yasutoshi's grandfather, Michitoshi. As you can see, Yasutoshi doesn't have much time left. The barrier has been erected once more, and the thing eating his flesh has stopped for now, but it's still getting through to him, and day by day he is wasting away. The weaker he gets, the more that girl and her mother grow. She already looks like she's in her 20s now. There isn't much time left." That weird girl I saw sitting in the garden, was that the girl Yasutoshi saw by the well, all grown up? A chill ran down my spine and I told him what I saw. No matter what we try to do to seal her, nothing works. The fact you can also see her proves how dangerous she is. Perhaps the only thing we can do is return her to the well and finish it there," he said. He suddenly sat up straight and then bowed his head towards me. "We're going to lower Yasutoshi into the well and pray for him there. Please help save my grandson." His voice shook as he spoke. I answered with a quick, "Yes." My name is Yasutoshi. Right now, I'm at the bottom of a cursed well. It's shaped like the bottom of a flask, so it's unexpectedly large, and even with a light in hand, it's difficult to light up the entire area. It's clear that a regular well was later changed, and I can see a pile of dirt in the corner. Perhaps this is where they buried the child. The bottom of the well has been turned into a mausoleum for the girl. At some point, I started to hear a voice calling out, yet the girl still hasn't appeared. For a moment, I felt a strange sensation, as though I had fallen into some water. Pain immediately coursed through my body, and then blood poured from tears in my flesh. I fear I am being eaten alive. Although I cannot see it, the newborn spider has started devouring my body. It seems that at some point it came to view me as its father. With this, I feel that maybe I can help Tomoaki. I still cannot speak. I'm desperately holding on and waiting for that girl to appear. But the pain is simply too much to bear, and so I threw the container holding my blood against the wall. The sensation of being in heavy water started to fade, but then it soon returned. Just as I felt myself about to pass out, I felt a different sensation, that distorted feeling. A girl smiled at me. No, it was that newborn spider's mother, Taishun's wife, the owner of the well. No, the well itself? In a daze, I said my first words towards her, one by one, putting my entire heart into them. I, your father, do not wish for you to remain here any longer. You must move on. I threw something like a scripture book dirty with my own blood at the mound of dirt. Fireworks went off and lit up the area. The woman crumpled to the floor with a sad look on her face. Her skin started to peel and fall to the ground. Something sounded like dripping nearby. Was it the sound of the newborn spider falling apart? There were numerous shapes that looked like blue orbs, but they appeared to get sucked into the ground. It was a sad, fleeting color. I later heard it was something they called haku, or yin energy. Just before I lost consciousness, I felt a rope tighten around my body. Did that single sentence break that curse that had gone on for so long? Did the strength of Taishun's feelings as a father contribute to the birth of that demon? Why did the traveling monk? In the midst of this storm of questions, I woke up. The sliding doors opened and a young monk with sharp eyes looked in on me. When he confirmed that I was awake, Yasutoshi and the head monk Michitoshi both entered the room. I was asleep in the room where Yasutoshi had been held. I sat up, my body burning with pain, and Yasutoshi approached me. "Lay down," he said. His body had regained some of its vigor, and his gaze was strong. He was going to be okay, I thought. I couldn't stop myself from smiling at him. "Kosuke-kun, I cannot thank you enough for taking my grandson's place. Although the law of transferring spirits could only be done by someone with ties to both Yasutoshi and the demon, when we consider the damage it has done to both your body and mind, it was an act outside our line of teaching. I am so terribly sorry. However, it's also true that there was no other way to save him. Please forgive us." Michitoshi deeply bowed his head. "No. It was to save my two friends," I said in a small voice, both sad and proud. "Ha! And for that I am most grateful. You have saved 3 people. That is a wonderful thing. However, I don't think I'm going to die such a pleasant death. If you curse someone, then you must dig 2 graves, as the saying goes." "Oh my. Well then, I have work to do, so you must excuse me. Yasutoshi, please chat with him for a bit, would you?" Michitoshi bowed to me once more, and then left the room with the young monk in tow. Yasutoshi and I sat in silence for a while. We were silent because Yasutoshi couldn't make up his mind on what to say. "What's all this now? Just say what you want to say," I said. He grinned. It was a lovely smile I hadn't seen in a long time. "We were both bitten by bugs, but it seems you were a little smarter than me," he said with his usual hateful tone. "Kosuke, let me tell you about what you're no doubt wondering. That girl was originally a normal newborn spider, but when she was sealed in that well, she cannibalized and absorbed her mother's strong powers, making her more powerful. That traveling monk from Tomoaki's story, his name was Nissho." "Yasutoshi, how do you know all this?" "Because he was my ancestor. That girl, she was basically an assassin from his past against our clan, I guess. Taishun was her blood, and I am his blood, he who created the demon. That's why she looked to me as a parent, not just because of my name." "Why would Nissho curse his own bloodline?" I asked. "Because the entire clan tried to kill him. Even now." "Eh? What the hell does that mean?" "No, don't worry about it. It's all over now thanks to you. Grandpa already thanked you, but let me thank you too. I've just been here doing nothing all this time. Thank you for helping me. Seriously, thank you. I've decided I'm going to follow in my family's footsteps. My father's back as well, and my grandfather's other business will be settled in a few days. Then I'll finally become a monk." He smiled. His eyes said there was nothing left to say. Yasutoshi was about to walk a different path to me. He wouldn't be able to act a fool like we did in the past. And I'd no doubt go back to my old life. Tomoaki too. I felt accomplished, but also sad. I had intended to help my friend, and yet I had probably lost him instead. The light on the other side of the sliding door seemed strangely bright. A big thank you and shout out to this week's Cummy Tier members, Nocturne and Christina. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to pick up Kowabana Volume 10, available on Amazon right now, and check out our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.